China, one of the oldest and most unbroken civilizations in the world. Around 5,000 years of written history, dozens of dynasties, civil wars, invasions, revolutions, and rebirths. In this video, we will trace the great turning points, rises, and transformations China has experienced from its earliest recorded beginnings to the present day. The earliest known eras of Chinese history begin with stories where legend and reality intertwine. In these ages, history was shaped not only by written documents, but by myths, epics, and oral traditions. The birth of Chinese civilization is generally linked to the Yellow River Basin, a region regarded as the cradle of the earliest political formations. The earliest dynasty of this period is said to be the Xia Dynasty. Although Xia remains debated among modern historians, it is embraced by the Chinese tradition as the first dynasty. According to legend, Xia rulers fought devastating floods, organized agriculture, and established social order. These narratives reveal just how deeply rooted the idea of statehood is in Chinese civilization. After Xia came the Shang Dynasty, the first Chinese state that can be confirmed through archaeology and material evidence. During the Shang era, a writing system emerged, allowing Chinese history to move from oral memory into written record. These writings were often carved onto what are known as oracle bones, animal bones, and turtle shells. Through them, kings sought signs about the future from gods and the spirits of their ancestors. In this era, kings were not only political leaders, but also religious authorities. Governance was inseparable from belief. Bronze craftsmanship flourished. Weapons, ritual vessels, and works of art were forged. The Shang Dynasty laid the foundations of China's state tradition through a model of centralized rule, leaving a legacy that would shape the centuries to come. The first pages of Chinese history rise through the mist of ancient legends and timeless tales. In an age when writing was not yet widespread, time itself seemed to flow according to the will of the gods. Kings were seen as figures who ruled not only people, but the heavens as well. Around the fertile and yet devastating waters of the Yellow River, one of humanity's oldest civilizations began to take root. This era bears the name of the Xia Dynasty, remembered through legend. Xia rulers are portrayed as leaders who defied nature, taming floods, cultivating the land, and gathering their people under a single order. These stories, where myth and truth blur together, reveal the profound depth of the state idea in China. As time moved on, legends began to give way to truths carved into stone and bone. With the rise of the Shang Dynasty, China stepped from the darkness of prehistory into the light of writing. The symbols etched onto oracle bones were not only attempts to foresee the future, they were the first breath of Chinese script. On those bones were the questions of kings, the answers of the gods, and the marks of fate. Shang kings were masters of both throne and temple. To rule was, for them, a sacred duty. Bronze was shaped by fire. Weapons and ritual vessels were offered to the divine. Faith, power, and state merged into a single center. It was in this era that the spine of Chinese civilization was forged, the foundations of a society destined to endure for thousands of years. With the fall of the Shang Dynasty, China witnessed not merely a change of power, but the birth of an idea that would alter the course of history. The sky was no longer silent. The will of heaven became the highest law governing the fate of kings. This era was called the Zhou Dynasty. Zhou rulers declared that their authority came not from the sword, but from heaven. According to this belief, known as the mandate of heaven, a ruler possessed the right to govern only as long as he remained just. But when tyranny, corruption, and chaos took hold, heaven withdrew its support. For the first time, the overthrow of a king was framed as a divine verdict. This concept was carved into the heart of Chinese political thought and endured for centuries. Over time, Zhou's central power weakened. Chinese lands fractured into feudal states locked in constant conflict. History drifted into the Warring States period. Yet from this chaos, some of humanity's most influential ideas were born. In this age, Confucius argued that order could be achieved through moral virtue. Laozi taught harmony with nature. While swords clashed, ideas took root. Under the shadow of war, philosophy was born. The Zhou era granted China not only a political legacy, but a moral and administrative tradition as well. Even when empires fell, these ideas remained standing, because China was now ruled not only by kings, but by thought itself. After centuries of chaos, the Chinese world faced a new destiny forged in iron and fire. From the ashes of the warring states rose a single power. Behind it stood one of history's most ruthless and determined rulers, Qin Shi Huang. In 221 BCE, the king of Qin crushed his rivals one by one and unified China under a single banner for the first time. There were no more kings, only one emperor. Qin Shi Huang did not merely conquer the land, he reshaped it. Writing, measurements, currency, and laws were standardized. The first great sections of the Great Wall were built. The state was placed above the individual. There was order, but there was little mercy. This harsh rule did not last long. The Qin dynasty collapsed under its own weight. Yet from its ruins rose a new and more balanced power, the Han Dynasty. Han inherited Qin's structure and gave it soul. Harshness gave way to stability. Fear gave way to continuity. Under the Han, China expanded beyond its borders and opened itself to the world. The Silk Road was established. Goods, ideas, and cultures began to travel across continents. Science, historiography, and state bureaucracy developed. This era immortalized Chinese identity, so much so that even today, the Chinese people call themselves Han. Qin unified China. Han carried it into eternity. With the fall of the Han Dynasty, China was pulled back into darkness. Central authority collapsed, the empire shattered, and the land plunged into an age where war never truly ended. The throne was no longer sacred. Those who possessed power ruled. China split among three great forces, and history opened a bloody chapter known as the Three Kingdoms period. In the north, the Kingdom of Wei rose with iron discipline. At its head stood Cao Cao, famed for both brilliance and cruelty. In the southwest, the Kingdom of Shu was ruled by Liu Bei, who claimed legitimacy through the Han bloodline. In the east, the Kingdom of Wu stood strong, defended by rivers and fleets. This was not only an age of war, it was an age of legend. Warriors who swore brotherhood, lives offered for loyalty, swords that would never forgive betrayal. The Battle of Red Cliffs became a turning point that altered history itself, proving that the weak could defeat the powerful through strategy. The Three Kingdoms period was brief, but its impact was eternal. It became a symbol of loyalty, strategy, and honor in Chinese culture, more a legend than a chapter in a history book. Because what was written here was not merely events, it was the memory of a nation. With the end of the Three Kingdoms, war did not end. China sank into an even deeper fragmentation. The empire was broken, the land divided into north and south. China was no longer a single destiny shared by one state. It became worlds that grew distant from one another. In the north, dynasties of steppe and nomadic origin ruled. In the south, old Chinese aristocratic families struggled to survive. Endless wars, migrations, and devastation exhausted the people. Yet within this darkness, a new light appeared. Buddhism offered hope to lives filled with suffering and chaos. Monasteries rose, monks spread knowledge and faith. The Chinese spirit underwent a profound transformation. After centuries of division, fate began to gather into a single hand once more. A short-lived but historic dynasty entered the stage, the Sui Dynasty. Sui reunified China. The Grand Canal was built, connecting north and south. This colossal project did not only bind commerce, it bound the empire's arteries together. But Sui's harsh rule drained the people's patience. Rebellions erupted, and the dynasty fell. Yet this collapse was not an end. It was the signal of a great beginning. Because from the ashes of Sui would rise one of the brightest eras in Chinese history. A new dynasty was rising on the horizon. The name of art, power, and splendor was approaching. Tang. Born from the ashes of Sui, the Tang dynasty did not merely reunify China, it placed it at the center of the world. The capital, Chang'an, was the greatest and most cosmopolitan city of its age. The Silk Road's heartbeat echoed there. Merchants, envoys, and thinkers flowed into China from every corner of the world. The Tang Empire drew its power not only from armies, but from culture. Poetry, art, and music reached a golden peak. The state system was built on merit. Officials were selected through examinations. China was no longer only a conqueror, it was an influence. Tang was the summit of civilization. But no golden age lasts forever. Court intrigues, rebellions, and internal decay slowly consumed Tang. After Tang, China gained a new face under the Song dynasty. Militarily weak, Song nonetheless defied history with intellect, science, and technology. Gunpowder, the compass, and printing advanced in this era. Trade expanded, cities grew, paper money entered daily life. Innovations that would transform human history quietly spread from China to the wider world. Song was an age where the pen ruled more than the sword. Painters captured nature. Philosophers questioned the universe. Yet a new threat began to rise from the north, shaking this refined order. Warriors on horseback had noticed Song's fragile defenses. Dust clouds were rising on the horizon. This time, the ones coming were not Chinese. This time, the ones coming were a force that shook the world. The Mongols. The horsemen from the north carried not only armies, but the beginning of a new age. The Mongols swept into China, like a storm that erased everything in its path. The legacy of Genghis Khan reached the Chinese throne through his grandson Kublai Khan. Thus, the Yuan dynasty was founded, and for the first time in Chinese history, the entire country came under the rule of a foreign dynasty. The Mongols were strong, but they were not Chinese. The distance between people and palace grew. Traditions were suppressed. Discrimination increased. Over time, this pressure became rebellion. Peasants, monks, and former elites rose up. The Mongol storm began to fade within its own harshness. From this chaos emerged a dynasty born from China's own core, the Ming dynasty. Ming returned China to the Chinese. The empire turned inward, tightening order and control. The Great Wall was expanded into a colossal barrier, an iron will built of stone and earth. Even great fleets that once sailed to distant seas were eventually called back. China chose self-preservation over the outside world, but history never stands still. This time, the Manchus came from the north. The Qing dynasty seized Beijing in 1644. China once again fell under the rule of a foreign dynasty. Under Qing, The empire reached its widest borders, but while the West accelerated forward, China remained behind. The Opium Wars, internal rebellions, and humiliating treaties forced the ancient empire to its knees. In 1912, 2,000 years of imperial tradition collapsed. The dragon's crown fell to the ground, and China was pulled toward the greatest transformation in its history. In 1912, the imperial system that had upheld China for millennia vanished into history. The throne had fallen, but a new order had not yet been born. China was no longer the age of dragons. It was the age of revolutions. The pioneer of this era was Sun Yat-sen, widely regarded as the intellectual father of modern China. His dream was a nationalist, people-driven, powerful China. But dreams collided with reality. The country fell into the hands of warlords. Central authority was weak. The people were poor. In this chaos, two great forces rose: the nationalists and the communists. China was dragged into a civil war, launched by its own sons. Then, an even greater threat arrived from outside. In 1937, Japanese forces invaded China. Cities burned. Millions died. The Chinese people faced one of the darkest trials in their history. Yet the invasion also strengthened resistance. The people learned to survive before ideology. When the war ended, China was devastated. But the struggle was not over. The Civil War ignited again. In mountains, villages, and cities, fate was being written once more. And in 1949, a new voice echoed in Beijing, one that would change the direction of history. China was preparing to rise from its ashes yet again. In 1949, history was rewritten in Beijing. A voice rising in Tiananmen Square carried the exhaustion and fury of centuries. Mao Zedong declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. There were no emperors anymore. The throne was gone, replaced by ideology. The new regime sought to erase the old. Land was redistributed. Classes were meant to be eliminated. But this radical transformation brought heavy costs. The Great Leap Forward ended in famine and disaster. Then came the Cultural Revolution, which destroyed the lives, memories, and past of millions. Temples were torn down, books burned, traditions labeled enemies. China was fighting its own soul. After Mao's death, a new leader stepped onto the stage: Deng Xiaoping. He was a man who believed in results more than ideology. With the famous saying, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice," he opened China to the world. Markets liberalized, factories rose, and hundreds of millions were lifted from poverty. Today, China is a superpower, launching into space, developing artificial intelligence, building massive projects. Thousands of years of history flow through the veins of this modern state. Dynasties fell, ideologies changed, yet China endured. Because China is not only a country, China is time itself. For 5,000 years, China has collapsed, divided, and been reborn. History could not stop it, and the future still must face it. Thank you for watching. If this story gave you a new perspective, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more documentary stories about time, history, and the human experience.